Welcome to Crimson Secrets. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. We post new stories every week, and before we get started below, and tell us what city you're watching from. We love hearing from you now. Let's get into it. He was standing at gate B14 at O'Hare International Airport when he saw her. Not saw her the way you see a stranger. Saw her the way you see someone your body still remembers before your brain catches up. The tilt of her head, the way she shifted her weight to her left hip. When she was waiting for something, the particular shade of dark red she always wore in autumn because she said it made airports feel less gray. Harrison Weld had not seen Nadia in 4 years, not since the morning she left their apartment in Lincoln Park with one suitcase, and the look of a woman who had already done her grieving in private. She didn't slam the door, that was the part he could never get over. She just closed it. Quietly, like she was trying not to wake someone. He had told himself for 4 years that he was over it. He was not over it. She was standing near the windows looking out at the tarmac, one hand wrapped around a paper coffee cup. She hadn't seen him. He had maybe 15 seconds before that changed. He used 12 of them, just standing there, a carry-on bag in one hand, and a boarding pass he'd already scanned twice by accident, watching the woman who had once known every version of him, the one who burned toast, the one who cried at documentaries about elephants, the one who built a company from a 2-room office in Wicker Park into something that other companies wrote case studies about, watching her stand at an airport gate like she was just a person, like she was just anybody. And then he noticed the girl beside her. She was maybe 3, maybe 4. Dark curly hair pulled into 2 uneven pigtails, the kind of pigtails someone had attempted with genuine effort but imperfect execution. She was wearing a yellow raincoat, even though it wasn't raining, and it hadn't rained in Chicago in a week. She had a stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, and she was tugging on Nadia's sleeve with her free hand, saying something that made Nadia look down and smile. Harrison looked at the girl. He looked at her eyes, and the carry-on bag hit the floor. He had met Nadia Osi 9 years ago at a conference in Seattle that he hadn't even wanted to attend. His business partner at the time, a man named Beck, who had an opinion about everything and was right about approximately half of it, had told him the panel on sustainable urban development was worth the flight. Harrison had gone. He'd spent the first 20 minutes checking emails. He'd spent the next 40 listening to a woman in the 3rd row ask questions that were sharper and more interesting than anything the panelists were actually saying. After the session, he'd introduced himself. She'd shaken his hand, told him her name, told him she was an urban planner working for the city of Chicago, and then asked him if he'd actually read the Katz report he'd referenced, or if he was just name-dropping it. He had in fact read it. He told her so. She'd looked mildly impressed. They'd had coffee. They'd had dinner. They'd talked until the hotel bar closed around them, and then stood outside in the Seattle drizzle for another 40 minutes, neither of them quite ready to say good night. He knew on the flight home, not in a dramatic way, not in the way people describe in movies, in the quieter way, the way you know something is true because it fits inside you without leaving edges. They got married 3 years later in a small ceremony in the Berkshires, Nadia in a cream dress she'd found at a vintage shop in Andersonville, Harrison in a suit that Beck said made a senator, which Harrison took as a compliment, and Beck had not meant as one. It was the best day of his life. He had been certain, standing there, that he understood now what people meant when they said they were lucky. What he had not understood, what he would spend 4 years learning, was how quickly luck can be quietly dismantled by someone who resents it. His mother, Charlotte Weld, was a woman who loved her son in the way that some people love their most prized possessions, completely, fiercely, and with an absolute refusal to share. Harrison had known this about her his whole life, and had always found a way to believe it was something other than what it was. Devotion, he called it, protectiveness, a mother's instinct. Nadia had seen it more clearly. She'd never said so outright, that was not her way. But Harrison had noticed, in the year after the wedding, the particular way Nadia would go quiet after his mother called, the way she'd put her phone face down and look out the window for a minute before coming back to whatever conversation they'd been having. He'd asked, once, she'd said. It was nothing. He'd accepted that because accepting it was easier than what it would have meant to push. What he didn't know, for a very long time, was what his mother had been saying. He didn't know about the calls Charlotte made to Nadia's office, the ones where she'd laid out, in the precise and controlled voice she used when she wanted something done, cleanly. Every reason Nadia was wrong for her son. The pedigree issues, as Charlotte put it. The fact that Nadia's family was from Accra, that her parents had work jobs Charlotte considered beneath the Weld name, that she had student loans and no connections, and nothing, in Charlotte's assessment, to contribute to Harrison's trajectory. He didn't know about the letter his mother had sent to Nadia's workplace. He didn't know about the things she'd said to Nadia at Christmas the year before she left, the things Charlotte had said, with a smile and a glass of wine in her hand, in a low voice, in the kitchen, while Harrison was in the living room, with his father talking about the Bears' playoff chances. He found out later, much later, after everything. What he knew at the time was only this, that Nadia grew quieter over the course of their 3rd year of marriage, that she started working longer hours, that there was a distance in her that hadn't been there before, a careful, maintained distance, and when he reached across it, she would let him, but she wouldn't reach back. He had told himself she was stressed. He had told himself it was work. He had told himself the things people tell themselves when they are afraid that the truth is something they could have stopped, and didn't. And then one Tuesday morning, she was gone. One suitcase. The door closed quietly. A note on the kitchen counter that said, "I'm sorry, and I love you, and I don't think that's going to be enough," and a phone number for a lawyer. He'd called the lawyer. He hadn't called Nadia. He didn't know why. Even now, he hadn't called Nadia. Pride, maybe? Or the particular paralysis that comes from feeling that if you ask for an explanation, and the explanation is what you suspect it is, you will have to do something with that information. He hadn't called. He'd let the lawyers handle it. He'd signed what needed to be signed. He'd gone back to work. He had built 2 more companies in 4 years. He had been profiled in 3 magazines. He had been to Tokyo, Sao Paulo, Dubai, Edinburgh. He had not stopped thinking about her. She turned from the window and saw him. For a moment, just a moment. Her face did the thing faces do, when the body is surprised before the mind can compose itself. Her lips parted. Her eyes went wide, then the composure came back, the careful, practiced composure of a woman who had clearly spent time thinking about what she would do if this ever happened. She looked at him steadily. She did not look away. The little girl tugged on her sleeve again and said, "Mama! Mama!" The rabbit dropped. Nadia looked down. She bent, picked up the rabbit, handed it back. Then she straightened and looked at Harrison again. Neither of them moved. He crossed the gate area. He didn't plan it. His feet just started moving. When he was close enough, he stopped, and for a second they just looked at each other. 4 years of everything sitting right there between them in an airport at 7:40 in the morning. "Harrison," she said. "Nadia," he said. The little girl looked up at him with enormous brown eyes and the specific lack of self-consciousness that only belonged to very small children and very old people. "Who are you?" she asked. Harrison looked at her. He looked at her eyes. They were his mother's eyes, the exact shape, the exact color, except Harrison's mother's eyes had never looked like that. Open like that. Like the world was still a place that could be trusted. He looked at her mouth, which was set in a line of polite suspicion, the mouth of a child who had learned to be curious about strangers, but careful about them too. He looked at her hands, one of which was wrapped around the rabbit, and one of which was now reaching back to find Nadia. "My name is Harrison," he said to her. He stopped. He looked at Nadia. Nadia was looking, and you've been trying to prepare for and discover in the moment that you weren't prepared for at all. "Her name is Soleil," Nadia said. And then very quietly, because the gate area was filling up around them and there were other people, and the board was showing a 20-minute delay, and the world was still moving in its ordinary way, despite everything. "She's 3. Harrison didn't say anything for a moment. He did the math. He had been doing it since the second he saw the girl's eyes. "How old?" he said, and his voice came out steadier than he felt, which was the only thing he could say for himself in that moment. 3 years and 4 months, Nadia said. She was watching him, not with fear, not with guilt, with something more complicated than either of those, the look of someone who has made decisions she stands by, even now, even with him standing 3 feet away, and the math, doing what math does. "We need to talk," he said. "I know," she said. Soleil looked between them. She held the rabbit tighter. Then she said, with great authority, "I need a muffin." They missed the flight. They sat in a corner of the terminal near a closed Hudson News. Soleil installed on a chair, with a blueberry muffin and a picture book she'd produced from Nadia's tote bag, and Harrison and Nadia sat across from each other and talked for the first time. In 4 years. It did not go the way he'd imagined it. He had imagined it going several ways over the years, with anger, with coldness, with a formal distance that demonstrated how well he'd moved on. Instead, he just listened. Nadia spoke carefully, the way she always had, choosing words the way a surgeon chooses instruments. She told him about the calls from Charlotte. She told him about the letter. She told him about Christmas, the kitchen, the wine glass, the low voice. She told him that she had tried for a year to believe it didn't matter, that love was supposed to be enough, and she had enough of it for both of them, and she could hold the line. "But I was pregnant," she said. "And I sat in our bathroom at 6 in the morning with that test in my hand, and I thought about what your mother had said, and I thought about what our child's life would look like, and I—" She stopped. She looked at her hands. "I made a decision. I don't know if it was the right one." "I know why I made it. You should have told me," Harrison said. His voice was steady. He had promised himself that whatever happened in this conversation, he would not raise his voice. He was keeping that promise. "I had a right to know." "You did," she said. She didn't argue with it. "You did. I know that. Why didn't you?" "Because I didn't trust that you'd believe me about your mother. And I didn't trust that, even if you did, you'd choose me over her. And I didn't trust myself. I was scared, Harrison. I was 29 weeks pregnant, and I was terrified, and your mother had spent a year telling me in very precise terms everything I wasn't, and She stopped again. I was not at my best. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at Soleil, who had crumbs on her chin, and was examining the rabbit's left ear with the intense focus of a scientist. "You were going to Chicago?" he said. "Going back. I had a conference. Where do you live?" "Philadelphia." She paused. "I went back to Accra for the pregnancy. My parents were there. After I came to Philly for a job. City planning. It's a good job." "Is it enough?" he said. Not cruelly, genuinely. She looked at him evenly. "We're fine, Harrison." He looked at his daughter, who had now placed the rabbit flat on the chair and was explaining something to it at length. "Her name," he said. "Soleil." Nadia's mouth curved very slightly. "She came in the early morning. The sun was just coming up. It seemed right." He sat with that for a moment. The sun coming up, and he hadn't known. The sun had come up, and a person had come into the world who had his mother's eyes, and a stuffed rabbit, and opinions about muffins, and he hadn't known. He had been in Tokyo. Probably. Or Edinburgh. He genuinely didn't remember which. He had been somewhere, doing something that had seemed important. "I'd like to know her," he said. Nadia looked at him for a long time. Long enough that Soleil finished her lecture to the rabbit and wandered over and leaned her full weight against Nadia's knee. "Tell me about Charlotte first," Nadia said. So he did. He had found out about his mother 6 months after Nadia left. He hadn't been looking for it. He'd been clearing out one of the spare rooms. A late-night task he'd taken on, partly out of productivity, and partly because the apartment was too quiet and he needed something to do with his hands. When he'd found a folder. A printed folder tucked behind some old design specs. A folder that Nadia must have kept and then forgotten when she left. Inside was printout of an email, his mother's email's work address. The date was 4 months before Nadia left. He read it once. He set it down. He picked it up and read it again. It was methodical, the way Charlotte was methodical about things. Not hysterical, not emotional. Just a clear, organized accounting of Nadia's inadequacies, her background, her family's finances, her inability, in Charlotte's view, to properly support what Charlotte called Harrison's world. There was a line near the bottom that stopped him. "I have spoken to others in your position. It is my experience that the most graceful thing a woman can do in circumstances like these is recognize when she is not suited to the role she has been asked to fill. I trust you will think carefully about the cost of continuing. He had sat on the floor of that spare room for a long time. He had then called his mother and told her what he'd found. He had done it quietly, without raising his voice, because Charlotte responded only to quiet, and he had learned, at an early age, that matching her volume gave her a target. And letting her have no target was the only way to make her actually hear anything. He told her what he had read. He told her that he would not be speaking to her for a while. He told her that she had cost him something he could not measure, and he did not currently know how to be in the same room with her. Charlotte had said that she had done what any mother would do. He had said he did not believe that, and he hoped it wasn't true. He had ended the call. That had been 2.5 years ago. He had not called her since. She had called him 17 times. He had answered twice, and both times kept it to under 4 minutes. He told Nadia all of this. When he finished, she was quiet for a while. Soleil had climbed back to her chair and fallen asleep with the rabbit over her foot, which Nadia gently relocated without waking her. "I'm sorry it took you finding that," Nadia said finally. You should have shown it to me," he said. "Yes, I know, but I also should have made it possible for you to show me things. I should have made you feel like I would listen." He paused. "I don't think I did that." She didn't argue with that either. They exchanged numbers at the gate for the next flight. His rebooked, hers delayed by weather. Soleil woke up from her nap fractious and demanding, insisted on sitting in Harrison's lap while Nadia went to get water, and spent 7 minutes carefully dismantling his boarding pass and pressing the pieces against his sleeve. "What's that?" he asked. "A boat," she said. "It is a great boat," he said. She looked at him with his mother's eyes and then said, with absolute seriousness, "Do you have any snacks?" He had a packet of peanuts from the last flight. She examined them as though considering whether he was worth her time, then accepted them. She tore the packet open with both hands, and with a force wildly disproportionate to her size, she spilled half of them. She ate the other half without comment, while studying him with the frank curiosity of someone who had not yet learned that staring was rude. "You look like my grandma's pictures," she said. He stilled. "What pictures?" On her phone. Old pictures. She pressed another torn piece of boarding pass against his wrist. A man. He looked up. Nadia had come back and was standing 3 feet away, holding 2 water bottles, watching them. She had heard. She sat down. She handed him one of the. She said, "My mother kept a photo. From before. I didn't know she'd shown it to her." He looked at the little girl in his lap who had lost interest in the conversation and was now building something architectural out of peanut shells on his knee. "She knows I exist," he said. "As a concept," Nadia said quietly. "I told her she had a father who lived in a different city. That's all. I wasn't keeping you from her forever, Harrison. I was trying to figure out what fair looked like. 4 years, he said. Not angry, just naming it. 4 years, she said. I know. He didn't say everything he could have said in that moment. He'd learned, in the years since the divorce, that not every truth needed to be said at full volume. He let the moment breathe instead. Soleil patted his knee. "All done," she announced, regarding her peanut shell structure with satisfaction. "What is it?" he asked. She thought about it. "A library," she said. "Very impressive," he said. She nodded, as if this were simply accurate information. He flew to Philadelphia 2 weeks later, not as a grand gesture. He had a meeting there anyway. The company's Northeast office was restructuring, and he'd been meaning to go in person for a month. He texted Nadia 3 days before. She replied in 4 hours. She said she had a park near her apartment that Soleil liked. She said Saturday mornings were usually good. He brought coffee. He did not know why he brought coffee. It was presumptuous, and maybe too many assumptions packed into a small paper cup. But he brought coffee anyway, the good kind from a place he'd looked up at 11 at night, and when Nadia saw it, she almost smiled. "You remembered," she said. "Oat milk, 1 sugar," he said. "You remembered," she said again, softer. Soleil had no interest in the coffee but significant interest in the park's population of pigeons, which she had decided to name. She named 4 of them before deciding she needed assistance and delegating the task to Harrison. He named a pigeon Gerald. He did not know why. It seemed like a pigeon name. Soleil approved of this with the gravity of a city council vote, and Gerald was thereafter considered official. They walked around the park twice. They talked the way people talk when they are relearning each other. Careful at first, then less careful, sliding gradually toward the rhythms that had once been second nature. Nadia told him about her work with the city's transit redesign. He told her about the new company, the infrastructure tech division he'd been building for 2 years. She asked about Beck. He said Beck had retired to Vermont and taken up bread making, which Nadia found deeply satisfying. On some level she couldn't quite explain. At one point Soleil fell down chasing Gerald, who had decided he was no longer cooperating with the naming ceremony, and skinned her knee on the path. She cried for 3 minutes, with the total commitment of a small person for whom pain is still a betrayal rather than just a feature of being alive. Harrison crouched down. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't have kids. He had no reference point for this. He just crouched down and held still and said, "I know, that really does hurt, and something about the directness of it." The lack of minimizing seemed to help. She cried for 1 more minute, and then stopped and looked at her knee and said, with a recovering sniff, "It does," he said. "You want a bandage?" "Do you have one?" she said with some skepticism, because he did not look like someone who would have a bandage. He looked at Nadia. Nadia produced a dinosaur-themed bandage from her jacket pocket with the efficiency of someone who had long since accepted that this was simply what pockets were for. Harrison applied it. Not well, he hadn't done this before, but with enough concentration that Soleil observed the process with a scientist's patience and only corrected him twice. "Thank you," she said, when it was done, very formally. "You're welcome," he said equally formally. They looked at each other. "Gerald ran away," she said. "He'll be back," Harrison said. "Pigeons always come back." She considered this. "How do you know?" "They're very attached to their parks," he said. "It's a known thing." She accepted this. She stood up, tested the knee, declared it operational, and went back to the path. Harrison straightened. Nadia was watching him from a few feet away, coffee cup in hand. The morning light was doing something kind to the park, the kind of light that made everything look slightly than it actually was, and she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't fully read. Something between careful and something else. Something that was trying not to be what it was. "You're good with her," she said. "I didn't do anything," she said. "That was the point," she said. "He came back the next Saturday. He didn't make it a thing. He texted Thursday." And she said Saturday was fine. He brought coffee. Again, same order. She didn't comment on the fact that he'd remembered 2 weeks in a row. He didn't comment on the fact that she seemed to have been expecting him. They established, over the next 2 months, a kind of rhythm. Every other Saturday, the park. Occasionally dinner, the 3 of them, at a place near Nadia's apartment, where the booths were wide enough for a small person to sit beside an adult and still have room to arrange her collection of small objects on the table. Rocks she'd picked up, a bottle cap, once a very specific acorn she'd been carrying for 6 days and considered essential. He did not push. He'd spent a lot of time in those years pushing against the grief of the divorce, against the silence, against the work, always against something. He was tired of it. He let the Saturdays be what they were. He let Soleil warm to him at her own pace, which was not fast but was genuine, and he found that he preferred genuine. In November, she started calling him Hari, which was not a name he had ever been called by anyone in his life. He accepted it without comment. She called Gerald's pigeon offspring. A pigeon she had decided was Gerald's son, and who was distinguishable from the other pigeons only by her conviction, Gerald Jr., which he felt was appropriately formal. He had a conversation with Nadia in December, on the bench they'd started to think of as, even though neither of them had said that, while Soleil conducted an important audit of a muddy puddle nearby. "I want to do this properly," he said. Nadia looked at him. "I want to be her father, not a Saturday person." Her father. Nadia was quiet for a moment. She turned the coffee cup in her hands. "That's a big word," she said. "I know what it means," he said. "She's going to depend on you," Nadia said. "She's going to love you and she's going to depend on you. And if that changes..." "It won't change," he said. "You don't know that. I know that I drove from New York to Philadelphia every other Saturday for 2 months in November traffic, he said, and I would do it twice a week if that was what you asked. She stared at him for a long moment. I'm not asking for what we were, he said. I know that's not. I know what happened, and I know what my mother did. And I'm not standing here, pretending that's all fixed. I'm asking for a chance to be there. For her, and whatever comes after that, we figure out. The puddle audit was apparently yielding significant findings. Soleil crouched by its edge with the focused energy of someone who has discovered something important and is determining how to communicate it. She's going to need boots, Nadia said. I'll get boots, Harrison said. Good ones. She destroys them. Understood. Nadia looked at him one more time, the long look, the one that had weight to it. Okay, she said. He found an apartment in Philadelphia in February. Not a hotel, not a sublet. An apartment on the 3rd floor of a building, 6 blocks from Nadia's, with 2 bedrooms and a window that looked out over a street, with trees that were bare now but would probably be something in spring. He assembled the furniture himself, which took longer than it should have, because the instructions were written by someone who seemed to consider success optional. He called Beck at 11:30 on a Tuesday from the middle of his half-assembled floor, surrounded by components and a single rogue dowel he was convinced belonged to something he hadn't built yet. Should I be concerned? Beck said. I'm building furniture, Harrison said. In February. In Philadelphia. It's an apartment. There was a pause. Nadia, Beck said. Her daughter, Harrison said. Our daughter, a longer pause. Oh, Beck said, and then, Harrison. Yeah, Harrison said. Good, Beck said. That's good, he finished the furniture. The rogue dowel turned out to belong to the bookshelf. He put books on the shelf. A mix of his, and the ones Nadia had flagged as things Soleil liked. The picture books with the good illustrations, the chapter books she wasn't quite old enough for but had decided she was. He put a second hook by the front door lower down, at the height of a small person who needed to hang up a yellow raincoat. Soleil came over for the first time on a Saturday in March. She walked through the apartment with the critical eye of a property inspector, examined both bedrooms, opened and closed every cabinet in the kitchen, and sat in the middle of the living room floor for 3 minutes, deciding what she thought. Then she said, Where's Gerald? Gerald is at the park, Harrison said. He doesn't do apartments. She accepted this. She looked around the room. The room. Again. I like the window, she said. Me too, he said. She got up and went to it and pressed her nose against the glass the way small children do, looking out at the February street. The trees are going to have leaves, she said. In a few months, he said. She nodded with satisfaction, as if this confirmed a theory she'd been working on. He stood in the apartment he'd assembled himself, surrounded by books and the particular quiet of something that was just beginning, and watched his daughter look out the window at trees. That would eventually be something in spring. It was enough. It was, he thought, quite a lot.